I've heard some criticism regarding the church's focus on temple construction, with some suggesting that funds could be better used for helping the poor. How do you personally respond to those concerns?
I'm glad that you asked this question because I've thought a lot about it. Changing negative entrenched behaviors is what humanitarian is all about. People are doing, certain behaviors that impact their health or their education or something. But it's so hard to change human behavior. There are reasons that we behave the way we do, and culture eats strategy for breakfast. That old thing. You can have all the strategy you want, but culture is what we respond to.
Okay.
And change comes from trust, and it comes from experiences, and entire groups have to make a new decision. So
Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me. This is such a privilege, and I have really been looking forward to this for quite some time.
I feel the same. I'm so excited to be on the Be Faithful podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited for this too. This is a really great launch episode. So, you have been the director of humanitarian services for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That is quite the title.
Yes,
And I can't imagine how busy you are and all of the experiences that you have gained from being in this field of work for over 20 years. Is that in humanitarian?
26 years.
Wow. So I'm just really excited to hear your insights and learn from you. I'm curious, what does a day in the life of the Director of Humanitarian Services look like?
It's such an interesting question. It's changed over time since I began, because in those days, we did a lot of the work from Salt Lake City. We were the project managers. We were making the relationships and arranging for the work to be done. We often traveled and went on the ground. But over time, about 4 years ago, the church made a good decision to decentralize all of that work out into the 23 areas that are, presided over by area presidencies. And that allows local people from the local communities to be the leaders over that work. And then my job has become, with my team, to make sure that they have the resources and the expertise, and if they need something, we help them at that. But it's changed over time. But I spend a lot of my time helping get approval for things, helping people find the resources that they need and the training that they need, and then going back and looking at the projects and see, what did we learn? If we do that project again, how will we improve it for next time?
So you're just empowering people all day.
That's what humanitarian development work is about.
Yeah. So how big is your team?
In Salt Lake, we have about 35 people that work directly on the humanitarian services team. And of course, we have finance and purchasing and legal and other groups that help us. But as a team, we're about 35 people. And then in every one of the 23 church areas that cover the globe, there are three or four or five people who are working on humanitarian for their geography. And we all work together. But it's a big
Wow. So how involved are the apostles in the presidency in the work that you and your team are doing?
That's a great question. For sure, they give us the resources. The resources that we use come from the humanitarian fund that people donate to, and also from tithing. And we get appropriation every year. And then depending on the level of a project, it gets approved at different levels of the church. And some things are approved at the area presidency level. Some things are approved at my level and my department's level. But the biggest projects go forward to our leadership council, which is made up of the presiding bishopric and the General Relief Society presidency. And so they approve those things. At certain things, strategic things, then they take those up to the first presidency and they're approved at that level. It's interesting to me that the first presidency is so interested that they, in person, will see, some of these projects, that they don't delegate that to somebody else. They care enough about it to give good strategic advice.
Oh, that's really cool. I love that. With the challenges the world faces today, how do you decide which issues to focus on?
It's such a good question, because you can dilute the effectiveness of what you're doing if you scatter things around. And for years, the current iteration of humanitarian services for the church started in 1985 with that famine that was in Ethiopia. And President Kimball suggested that the church members fast on a certain Sunday, and whatever was donated from that fast would be given to famine relief. And so on that special, I think it was in January of 1985, or 6. Whatever was donated from members fasting was given to that. And they thought they'd just spend the money and then it would be over, but people continued to contribute money. They wanted to participate in things that had caught their minds or in their eyes on the news or other things. And so the money kept coming in. So finally they had to say, we need employees or section who will figure out what should we donate to and what kinds of projects should we do. And for a long time, we just did small things, scattering things around, trying to learn about that. But in 2002, a decision was made, let's focus on certain things that we do well. One of those was maternal newborn care. We actually sent doctors and nurses to train other doctors and nurses on how to improve that care. Wheelchairs was one of them. Vision care was one of them. Clean water. And if you ask people about church humanitarian, they'll often talk about those things.
Okay.
But at the time when we decentralized that to 4 years ago, the decision was made, let's let every area of those 23 areas focus on the things that are most important in their geography, and they'll know what those things are. And then on behalf of the president of the church, the global, we'll choose one priority. So we did a bunch of data collection. We tried to see what's the most important thing that we could do that would make a difference in people's lives all over the world that a church is geared to do. The global priority that was chosen was the well-being of children under 5, that they survive their birth, their mother survives their birth, that they get their routine vaccinations, that they have access to clean water, they eat enough nutritious food that their brains develop, they start primary school. Because if you can affect those things, a lot of other humanitarian needs later on go away. So I'm happy I can talk at length about those things, but that is the global priority. And so while we continue to participate in emergency response and every one of those areas have their priorities, this is the global priority for the church. And the First Presidency put the Relief Society in charge of it.
That is really cool. I love that the priorities are coming from the locals up to you. I just can't imagine how overwhelming that can be because there's so much going on. And like we're talking about the entire world. With needs, we kind of talked about how you identify the need, but like how do you identify the area?
You talked about how overwhelming it is. And because our news access is 24/7 and we're always checking the news and looking at our apps to see what happens. And I get a ding every time there's an earthquake or, anytime there's an emergency, I get alerted, and we all get alerted all the time. And it's easy to kind of get overwhelmed by that. I have to really watch what I read at night, because last night I was reading about the toxic contamination from the LA fires, how it's all that stuff that burned is in the dirt. And as they start cleaning it up in construction, it gets up in the air. And then I couldn't sleep last night because now I'm all worried about the toxic pollution in Los Angeles. Right. But I think it's important for me and others to recognize huge amounts of progress have been made. We don't recognize that because there's a lot of problems. From the beginning of mankind on the earth until about 200 years ago, 1 out of every 2 kids died before they got to 15. So 50% mortality rate before your child reaches 15. And so that's during the time when the church started. And think about the potential of that. Children, parents lose their children and the grief of that. Siblings, have that, the loss of families, but also the loss of talent and ability and leadership for the next generation, that you would lose half of your people. In the last 200 years, huge progress has been made. So by 1950, that number was only 25%. And that's because of public health and clean water and accident prevention.
That's worldwide?
Vaccines. These are worldwide numbers.
Okay.
And it's interesting that it all went down in 1950 across a vast difference of countries. And then by 2020, so just a few years ago, right before the pandemic, that global number was 4%. That means 96% of the kids are staying alive until they're 15. It's an enormous difference. A lot of progress has been made.
Wow.
So
that is
in
so cool.
really wealthy countries that have small populations like Iceland and Japan and Norway, it's 0.4%.
Yeah.
Somalia is 14%. They're the highest in the world. But somewhere in between there, children have a much higher chance of living. But the thing that energizes me is still 6 million children every year die. And about 16,000 deaths every day, and about 1 every 11 minutes. And they're mostly preventable because of nutrition and, some of those other things that I talked about. So this is something, and you know it's possible because those countries are doing it. If we put energy into it, we can really impact that number, and it has huge impact for the world at large. And for all the other problems that are going on, we need the talent and the leadership of that rising generation. And the best thing we can do is make sure that they live and thrive. So that's something that really energizes me. And it has to do with the global priority that the church chose. But those statistics, you can tell we've made progress, and there's still a lot of progress to be made.
The things that keep you up at night. That's pretty amazing. So, going back to what you said about the Los Angeles fires, do you go in or send people in, I mean, to kind of mitigate the damage? Like, are you problem solving that right now? Do you have people on the ground that are going out and
The thing about humanitarian problems and development problems is they're mostly too big for any one organization or one group to do. They're
right?
all interconnected, they're holistic. You do one thing and it causes a problem on another side. So for me, the best solutions are also interconnected. So the church has a tremendous grassroots ability, because we have congregations in 172 countries, people who live there, work there, they have their own, employment and expertise. They're very connected to what is happening on the ground. And the volunteerism that the church, offers through fires and hurricanes and all those things, it allows people that are living right there in their communities to be super active and help, but also coordinate with the local government and the local organizations and the municipalities. What do you need? Because we don't want to come in and do things that are too soon or it's the wrong thing. So there's a lot of coordination that happens. But the grassroots ability of the church is tremendous. At the same time, at the corporate level or the global level, if you want to call it that, we have the ability to reach out to organizations that are best in class. If you're talking about child hunger or you're talking about micronutrients and prenatal vitamins from others, who does that better than anybody else? Who has the best information? Who collects the best data? UNICEF, Gates Foundation, people who have a real global look. And we're a big enough player, although we're not a huge player, that they are willing to interact with us. And then we can fund or help fund globally integrated solutions at the same time. So we can do something at that global level and at the grassroots level, and hopefully they're meeting in the middle.
Wow. Sorry, I don't mean to just keep saying wow, but I'm just amazed at what you do. I don't work anymore. I stepped away from working about 3 months ago when I was in accounting.
Well, you have
So
two beautiful reasons to not be working.
yes, but I'm more just speaking to like I don't know. Being an accountant is not as interesting as what you do. And gosh, I'm just grateful for what you're doing. Like beyond grateful. You're making such a huge impact in the world. I
But
just
Lauren,
love it.
I want to say something about that because you're not working as an accountant right now. It's a very necessary skill. People really need accountants, including me. But this podcast is doing a great amount of service. It brings awareness to things that are interesting to you and other people about faith and the world. I think that's a tremendous service to a lot of people. I rely on the things that you're doing. So I hope that people find their talents and they offer them in the huge variety that we do. Because what I'm doing isn't the be all end all. And what you're doing is we need each other and we all need to
Right.
do the things that we can do.
Yeah, I love that quote. You'll go faster alone, but farther together.
Yeah, it's
So
a
I
great
do.
quote.
It's true. All right. I would love to hear what have been your biggest takeaways and lessons that you have learned doing the humanitarian work with the church, and how has your approach evolved? And I know you've kind of already touched on this a little bit. So,
That's a very perceptive question because everybody's approach evolves when you get more experience. You start off with a certain, predisposed feeling. My predisposed feeling was if I'm a humanitarian, I'm going to be giving things away in an exotic location. That's what I thought it was about. People have a terrible need. I'm going to go there. I'm going to give you a thing that you need. But I have come to learn over time that everybody's a giver, everybody's a receiver at the same time. And what we're really doing is exchanging. I have something you need, you have something I need. And they're different, but we both need each other. And when we do that exchange, we're both richer. And I also believe, although most people will argue with me, that we're most powerful where we live. So you and I live in North Salt Lake, and the problems and issues that are in North Salt Lake aren't any more or less important than Ukraine or Sudan or something else. They're just different. They're just different. And so we have issues that are unique to where we live, and we're powerful to address them because we speak the language, because we're connected here, because we live here all the time, and it isn't just 1 week or 2 weeks. And those things are important. And that's why I really believe that the people who live in the community themselves have the most power to address what's needed. The solutions are inside them because they know those things. And then, of course, there's always things that we can't change. They're just awful and they're miserable, but they continue to happen. It's just part of this mortal experience. And for one individual, there are things about geography and conflict and, personal relationships that we just, for whatever reason, we aren't able to change at that time. But I believe that God responds to people who trust him, and that faith makes a difference, and that God loves the unlikely. And if we can't do anything except pray, prayer is a powerful intervention. And whether that help comes sooner or later, we're part of the solution when we've exercised our faith. So I believe in that. I believe in all people of faith can do things, and a lot of good gets done in the world because people have faith.
I love that. I feel like you're empowering our listeners to think, we can make a difference in Ukraine. Prayer is real. We may not be there. We may not be mailing things to them, that medical supplies or something, but prayer is real. I do love that.
I can't remember that it's in James, and it's probably in chapter 5, but it says the prayer of a righteous person is effectual. And I take that literally. If I want to help and there's no other way for me to help, I can pray, and God somehow takes the energy of my faith and does something in that situation.
Yeah. I believe that. Kind of back to your corporate side, has working on the corporate side of your religion challenged your faith or strengthened it? And do you have any examples you'd like to share?
Well, anybody who works in a large organization is going to have a bureaucracy. And bureaucracies, they're frustrating. We all get frustrated. And we also, you're part of when we participate in a large organization like that, you give up your ability to make direct decisions, because now you're part of a big interconnected web, and there's a lot of people making those decisions. So years ago, I owned a toy store in Provo. Loved the business. It was so fun. And my partner and I we could make decisions at lunch, and we could implement by 2:00, and it was just boom. And there was something so satisfying about that. Mm-hmm. And when I sold the store, I came directly to work at the church. And the church is an enormous bureaucracy that doesn't run like any other bureaucracy. It has its own hidden rules and everything. But what you trade off is the ability to do things at scale. The church bureaucracy is able to do things at a global scale over a long period of time that I did not have the ability to do as a toy store owner. So the balance of those two things is what's going on. And of course, we all have difficult experiences. People aren't acting according to their values, or they're making mistakes, or they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing. But that's just part of being mortal. And when you have a big bureaucracy, you have a lot of those people and a lot of those stirs, and I'm part of it too. I'm making mistakes as well. Right. But hopefully in a place like the church, we're able to give each other a little bit of grace and listen to each other and try to say, I didn't understand that, tell me that again. And I'll just give you an example. Early in my career, I worked for LDS Employment, and I was sent out on a visit to one of our offices, and we were trying to show that, the old ways weren't working and the new ways would work. And I pushed that employment director, who had given 20 years of service with heart and sincerity. I pushed her to a place where she felt like I didn't like her. I thought she was a failure, and I made her feel unvalued. And I have regretted that ever since, because I was young and I was trying to show that, I've got the chops, we can do this. We're going to fix this system. And I have always regretted that, and always wanted to ask her to just please forgive me. I was an idiot. And if I look back on that with my mature eyes, I would do it so differently. But she, she just tried to take our advice with a grain of salt, and she was very gracious about it. But I've always regretted things like that. So I'm grateful for people who have allowed me to change. I try to allow people to change in those ways. Yeah, bureaucracies are frustrating, but they do things at a scale that can't be accomplished any other way.
Thank you for sharing that experience. That is humbling to hear coming from someone that seems like they've got it all together. I'm not the only one that makes mistakes, huh? So we're going to kind of switch gears here. But sometimes it really does seem like the whole earth is in commotion. Would you say that natural disasters and conflict have increased recently over the years, or is this perspective coming from our access to 24/7 news outlets and social media?
I kind of address that because I think those alerts and everything about social media really get in our head. They interrupt our day, and it changes our perception about what things are happening. But it's also true that natural disasters, because of changes in the climate or man-made, I don't know, developments, I guess you would call it, they're increasing. And they're increasing because the severity of storms is bigger. Droughts are droughtier and floods are floodier, and super typhoons. The data shows that there are more of them. They're more severe. And
Okay.
they impact more people because people are living in places where they didn't used to live. So you've got communities that live up in the hills above big cities where the wildfires rage, which before you didn't have houses over there. You have people living in floodplains where they didn't used to live. And so it increases the impact of hurricanes and typhoons and fires, the human impact on those. So I think both those things are happening. And I think conflict is also driving displacement. And it used to be we'd have a couple conflicts and we'd try to respond to those, but we now have really large conflicts that are happening all at the same time. So the number of displaced people is much higher. So you have people that are outside of Ukraine, outside of Syria, outside of DR Congo, outside of Sudan. And then they don't have access to the regular networks that are helping them. And so then they're reliant on the host community or the people who help manage refugees, or only 1% of them ever get settled in a new country. 99% of them are sitting in those camps for 20 years. And that's just really disruptive to education, to health, to agriculture, all of those things. And because the news, we're more aware of that. And so it feels like there is more going on. I don't know if that answers the question, but I think those are why it feels that way.
Okay. So in a sense, yes, the wildfires are every year it's the biggest wildfire we've ever had, right? But then also the awareness combined with the two things it seems like there's a lot.
And I have a strategy for myself because I get easily overwhelmed. I consume a lot of news, and so I watch every day, what's happening. And it's easy to just feel like I cannot do anything about this, and it's just heartbreaking. But when something happens, I'm trying to think of a good example, but I can't do anything about what's happening in Israel and Gaza. There's very few things that I can do. They're being constrained by politics and a lot of other things. But I can do something for an Israeli or a Palestinian who lives where I do, and maybe we can celebrate Ramadan or Yom Kippur or Easter together in a way that says we both care about peace. When I get overwhelmed by big problems, I try to go to something small where I have some control and try to do something for that. And that helps me. I have the energy to do something, and although I can't affect the large problem, I can do something about a small problem. And that seems to work for me as a strategy.
To help build Zion, where you are right now. So here's a little bit of a thorny question. So I've heard some criticism regarding the church's focus on temple construction, with some suggesting that funds could be better used for helping the poor. How do you personally respond to those concerns?
I'm glad that you asked this question because I've thought a lot about it. Changing negative entrenched behaviors is what humanitarian is all about. People are doing, certain behaviors that impact their health or their education or something. But it's so hard to change human behavior. There are reasons that we behave the way we do, and culture eats strategy for breakfast. That old thing. You can have all the strategy you want, but culture is what we respond to.
Okay.
And change comes from trust, and it comes from experiences, and entire groups have to make a new decision. So the question is, why is the church building these big, expensive buildings that are exclusive to a certain strata of members of the church and cost so much. Why don't they give that money to the poor? But think about what happens in temples. People enter into them and they're going to make the most sacred promises of their life, and they're going to mean what they say. And so they promise to be faithful to their spouse, to have healthy relationships, to not be corrupt, to think about and serve others when there's no benefit to them, to sacrifice their treasure and their talent for the good of the community. And it's all voluntary. It's all between you and God. And then when they walk out of those temples, hundreds, thousands of people that have made those promises and they're intent on fulfilling those promises, they go out into the community where they live and they work, and the whole community experiences the rise of that if they follow through, because negative behaviors can change and unhealthy habits will get way, and schools are going to improve and health clinics are going to get better and poverty rates go down because the cooperation among the community is increased. And they're looking to build bridges to other people, other good people, whether they're people of faith or not. If they keep the promises that they make in a temple, the whole community will benefit from that. So it's not the temples themselves, but it's the promises that are made in them that are a powerful driver for development. And I would never give that up. It's a way to change human behavior that we can't always do in a humanitarian project. It's very, very powerful. So I think about it in those terms. I've seen it work in those terms. And that's how I feel about this great era of temple building that we're a part of. It has huge ties to Zion and lifting up the poor.
I absolutely agree with that. I love it. So I actually was out of the church for 13 years, from the age of like 12 to 25. I came back when I was 25. I was very much on my own for a lot of my teenage years and my 20s. And I unknowingly had PTSD from just some trauma from my youth. And I just remember having the hardest time changing. And I would read books like The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. And I would just be like, how do I change my thoughts? I can't change them. Like, I have these negative thought patterns that I know I need to change. And I would just continually like repeat these behaviors, date like the same type of guy that was like a dead end relationship. And I knew I wanted a family, but I didn't even believe in God anymore. And I started dabbling in the church, feeling like I was really lost, and I knew like I'm wrong about everything. And I wasn't helping anybody. Okay, that's a lie. I was still like a good family member and stuff, but I wasn't worried about my community, really beyond myself and my family. I wasn't like out trying to, consecrate my time and talents. As I have come back to church, I have gone to the temple, I have made those covenants, and it's true. I am able to help so much more the people around me because of how self-reliant I've become. By practicing it, I have seen the difference, like the changes that I wanted in myself. Christ has helped that through the atonement, and he's helped to change my heart. And I find so much joy in helping others, so much more than just like trying to figure things out and serve myself all the time. I'm the one that's unhappy. I'm the one who needs to be served. It's so much more fulfilling and brings so much joy and happiness by going out and serving others. It really, truly does. It's just those sacred experiences that I think of inside the temple that have affected my life, made me happier, and made me a more productive member of society. And I've seen it in my own life. So everything that you're saying about working on, the ground level and things coming from the locals and making covenants, and it starts from within and it works out, and everything becomes better around you when you become better inside because of Jesus Christ.
I gave a philosophical answer and you gave a really personal answer, which I think is really important because that's your lived experience and you've felt that difference. And I hope lots of people do.
Yeah. There's been some controversy with the church building City Creek Mall. How do you respond to the people that have taken issue with this?
I'm not involved in City Creek. I don't have any additional insight, but I just think about it as a community member. I'm looking at it, from the sidewalk where we all go. And I can see that the goal was they're going to give a targeted outlay that was going to improve the safety and create a thriving business district and bring new employment and create green spaces. They were trying to revitalize a downtown location so that all those things could happen. And I remember years ago, before it was even opened, I heard, it may have been on the radio, but I heard one of the architects, non-member of the church, talk about City Creek. She was from Denver. And she said, I don't know that the city or the community is recognizing this is a church that's investing in the progress of the whole neighborhood. And I know that other people have different views, but she was just saying this is so unusual in the communities and projects that she's worked on, that they were trying to create those green spaces and employment opportunities and safety and all those things with the project. Now, how successful it was, I don't know. People have different opinions about that. But as just a community member, as a member of the church looking at it, I can see the intent and what they were trying to do and what they've tried to do in other places. And you and I were talking earlier about it's a matter of taking resource and trying to make the most of that resource. You had a good comment about that, about talents, which I thought was really good.
Yeah, the parable of the talents. That is what I think about a lot with people, like we were saying earlier. And I'm in no way saying that you should not donate, because I am a huge proponent for, giving to those in need. I have been on the receiving end, and if I had millions and millions of dollars, I would probably give it a lot of it away. You can ask my husband. But if the church were just, say we were just taking tithing and giving it away, we would run out of money. And if I'm going to give the church my tithing, I want them to be good stewards of it. I want them to make more money with my money. I want them to take those 5 talents and make another 5 talents, because you can do so much more with more money. Like, I don't expect it to just be turned around and given straight to somebody else. I would just do that myself. They are better stewards for, like you said, these type of large scale things. And us as members, by paying our tithing, are really making a difference in the world just by paying tithing. And so thank you. I that was really informative what you told me. I love hearing about the architect's opinion. That was cool. All right. In our current environment, people's views differ drastically, and it seems like people are becoming more divided all the time. We have all been impacted in one way or another by the political climate or a loved one leaving the church. What is your advice for those of us seeking with conflict resolution within our personal relationships?
Well, this is a timely question because we all face that. We all have conflict in our life. I have a really strong memory of 2 good friends of mine. They're married, and they were disagreeing vehemently about some social policy. But they were sitting on a couch, and the wife's feet were in the husband's lap. And the whole time they're disagreeing with each other, he's massaging her feet. And I thought, how do you do that? How do you be so, strong in your opinions about this is the way? No, I'm telling you, this is the way. But their personal relationship was completely unaffected by that. And the image of that really stayed with me a long time. And maybe people in our community, they know who Pamela Atkinson is. She's one of the great advocates for homeless people who are unhoused in our community. She's an elder in the Presbyterian Church. But she told a legislator once, she said, I disagree with you 75% of the time, but I still like you and we're still friends. And I think we're losing that in our society right now, because people say, if you're not my political persuasion, you're not my faith, you're not, whatever, we get isolated into these tiny boxes, and it's just like we don't have anything else in common anymore. And I can't interact with you because we don't agree on certain social things or others. And I think that really makes us a lot poorer. And I'm always looking for mechanisms that will bring people who completely disagree into some kind of an interaction, like my friends sitting on the couch. And for me, volunteer service is one of those things. So the great platform of Just Serve, where you can put in your zip code and up will come, opportunities for you to volunteer. When you go down and volunteer at the little, food pantry that's just down the hill from where I live, that's run by Catholic nuns, and they need Spanish speakers, and a bunch of Spanish speakers come and help that. We don't all fit into the same demographic, but it's very positive that we care about, the food bank in our little community. And I think we need experiences like that we have something in common. And so interfaith, I think, is great. When people of different faiths or of no faith come together to work on the school or the health clinic or, cleanup or preparedness, that's really positive when we have those bridges with each other. And I'm always looking for new opportunities to create those bridges that we don't have to agree. I disagree with you 75% of the time, but we're still friends. And that makes the community a lot more resilient and a lot richer, I think.
I love that. So for my next family outing, I'm going to get on Just Serve and I'm going to find something we can go volunteer. And I'm going to take all my family members and I'm going to say, we're not going to argue about anything. We're just going to serve. And it's going to be a great bridge building activity and it will grow our love. I love that.
Great. Invite me back. You can tell me what happened.
I will. Well, that was all my questions. So thank you for answering all of them. So, my final question for all my Be Faithful episodes, I want to ask you, what is your why? Why have you committed your entire career to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? You're clearly very talented and intelligent. You could probably go anywhere and do what you're doing. And I'm just wondering, why do you spend so much of your spare time also committed to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
Sometimes you'll read things online about, where the pearl of great price came from, the origins and everything. But I think one of the great things out of the pearl of great price that we would have never known before is about the council in heaven. And you have that discussion where God gathers all of his children. He explains that he wants us to have these mortal experiences, but we are going to make mistakes and he's going to need a savior. And he describes that savior will have to bear the weight of all the sins and all the mistakes that the entire spiritual heavenly family makes. And I imagine myself thinking, who could do that? Who has the fortitude and the strength to be able to have the confidence, the spiritual confidence to do it? And then witnessing that Jesus Christ would stand forward and say, here am I, send me. And the fact that he would be able to bear it. And all of us had the faith that he would do it. We went ahead and were born and came along and he had to make his atonement in the middle of our history. But the fact that he did it and that he bore that, and we all have the path to come back because he allows us to repent of the heinous, horrible things that we do and the mundane, just boring, petty sins that we do. I'm so grateful for that idea, that concept, that in the tiniest of ways, I just want to spend my life saying in the same way, here am I, send me. I'm not perfect. I don't have a lot of capacity. I can only do certain things. But if I can be useful to you, please use me. So if I can be a good minister, if I can be a humanitarian, if I can help in my family, if I can be a peacemaker, with all the mistakes that I'm making away, please use me and help me be in the shreddiest way possible that I could be just a tiniest bit like the Savior Jesus Christ. That's all I want out of my life. It's why I'm in the gospel. It's why I let all the mistakes and all the stuff that shouldn't be happening happen, just roll off my back, because it's about Jesus Christ and his grace and his love and my ability to try and be the tiniest bit like him. That's why.
You are such an incredible person. I can't even tell you how grateful I am to have had this opportunity to talk with you. You are one of the kindest people that I've really been able to speak with, especially on a professional level when I'm way out of my pay grade right now. And you just do so much in the world and even in on our community level. And I just can't thank you enough for your wisdom and what an insightful and informative interview this has been. So thank you.
You're being very gracious, Lauren, but I feel the same way about you. And if I had had the confidence and the ability at your age, who knows what would have happened in this world. I see what you do with your family, with the podcast, with your work in our community. I'm truly grateful for what you're doing.
Thank you. That was really kind of you. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed this content, please like, subscribe, and share. The Be Faithful podcast is not endorsed or sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This is my personal attempt to share the light of Jesus Christ and to testify that he lives. So please stay tuned for more inspiring conversations. And until next time, keep the faith.